Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Vengeance, watching the stars drift past the viewport. The ship hummed with the steady rhythm of deep space travel. His crew moved quietly at their stations, handling the routine tasks that kept them alive in the black void between worlds. The communication panel beeped with an urgent signal. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Brooks looked up from her tactical station with surprise on her face. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It's marked as urgent and classified." Morrison frowned. The Galactic Council rarely contacted human ships directly. Most communication went through proper diplomatic channels on Earth. "Put it through to my ready room, Commander." "You have the bridge." The captain's ready room was small but functional. Morrison activated the secure communication system and waited. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the familiar council chamber with its representatives from dozens of alien species. The current speaker was Counselor Velter, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. "Captain Morrison of the Terran vessel Vengeance," Velter began, his voice carrying the formal tone of official business. "We contact you with a matter of great importance to your species and to the galaxy as a whole." Morrison remained silent, waiting for the alien to continue. He had learned that patience was often the best approach when dealing with galactic politics. Every 300 standard years, the galaxy observes an ancient tradition known as the Trial of Supremacy. This trial determines the order of military power among the star-faring races. 2 species are chosen to represent the pinnacle of warrior excellence, and they engage in single combat to establish dominance. The captain felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had heard whispers of such trials, but they were considered legends by most humans. "What does this have to do with humanity, Counselor?" Velter's expression grew serious. "The Galactic Council has determined that humanity has achieved sufficient military capability to participate in the trial. You have been selected as one of the 2 competing species." "Selected by whom?" Morrison asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "By the Council's Military Assessment Division. Your species has shown remarkable growth in defensive capabilities and has successfully repelled several minor threats to your borders. The mathematics are clear. Humanity qualifies for the trial." Morrison's mind raced. Humanity had indeed grown stronger in recent decades, but they were still newcomers to galactic civilization. Most of their conflicts had been small disputes with raiders or territorial disagreements with neighboring systems. "Who is our opponent?" "The Krexa Empire." Velter replied without hesitation. The name hit Morrison like a physical blow. Every human in the military knew about the Krexa. They were the galaxy's most feared warrior race, standing over 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could tear through steel. Their empire controlled 17 star systems and had never lost a major conflict. The Krexa have participated in 7 previous trials, Velter continued. They have emerged victorious in each encounter. Their current champion, War Leader Thakmer, has personally defeated over 200 opponents in ritual combat. Morrison struggled to keep his voice steady. "What happens to the losing species?" "The losing species acknowledges the supremacy of the victor and accepts their place in the galactic hierarchy. There are also territorial considerations and resource allocation adjustments." The captain knew there was more to it than that. The Krexa were known for their brutal efficiency in dealing with defeated enemies. Species that challenged them and lost often found their worlds stripped of resources and their populations scattered across the galaxy as laborers. "When does this trial take place?" Morrison asked. "In 60 standard days. The location will be the Coliseum of Fates, a neutral station specifically designed for such encounters. Your champion will fight the Krexa champion in single combat until one yields or dies." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. 60 days to prepare for a fight that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. What are the combat parameters? Standard. Galactic combat protocols apply. No weapons beyond natural capabilities and simple tools. The environment will be set to accommodate both species' physiological needs. Valter paused. The arena conditions are typically quite challenging: high gravity, variable atmospheric composition, and temperature extremes. I need to consult with my government, Morrison said. Of course. However, understand that refusing to participate would be considered a declaration of weakness. The Krexo would be within their rights to claim human territory by default. The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with the weight of the decision. He activated the ship's internal communication system. Commander Brooks, Dr. Amy Carter, and Major Kate Sullivan to the ready room immediately. The 3 officers arrived within minutes. Lisa Brooks had been Morrison's tactical officer for 5 years and knew him well enough to read the tension in his posture. Dr. Carter was the ship's chief medical officer and their best expert on alien physiology. Major Sullivan commanded the ship's Marine contingent and had extensive experience in ground combat. We have a problem, Morrison began, then explained the situation. He watched their faces change as the implications became clear. The Krexa have never lost a trial, Brooks said quietly. I've studied their military history. They don't just win, they dominate completely, Doctor. Carter leaned forward. What do we know about their physiology compared to humans? They're larger, stronger, and have natural weapons, Sullivan replied. But more importantly, they've been bred for combat for thousands of years. Their entire culture revolves around warfare, Morrison nodded grimly. The Council classified Earth as a garden world in their initial surveys. They think we're a peaceful species that happened to develop technology if we refuse the trial. Brooks asked. The Krexa claim our territory by default. Earth becomes a Krexa world. The room fell silent as they absorbed the full scope of the situation. Humanity faced a challenge that seemed impossible to win, but refusing would mean the end of human independence. We need to contact Earth Command immediately, Morrison said. And we need to start analyzing everything we can find about previous trials. 60 days isn't much time to prepare for the fight of humanity's life, Doctor. Carter spoke up. Captain, there might be something the Council doesn't understand about us. What do you mean? They classified Earth as a garden world, but that's based on their standards. What we consider normal might be quite different from what other species can handle. Morrison looked at his officers with a spark of hope. Get me everything you can find on galactic environmental standards. And find out exactly what conditions exist in this Coliseum of Fates. As his team left to begin their research, Morrison stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a Krexa warrior was preparing to fight for his species' continued dominance. In 60 days, humanity would discover if they had what it took to survive in a galaxy where only the strongest species were allowed to remain free. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and Morrison knew that everything depended on finding humanity's hidden advantages before it was too late. Admiral Henry Clark stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the docking platform of the Coliseum of Fates. The massive space station stretched out in all directions, its dark metal hull covered with lights that pulsed in alien patterns. He had never seen anything like it in his 30 years of military service. The platform buzzed with activity as representatives from hundreds of different species gathered to witness the trial. Clark could identify maybe a dozen of the alien races around him. The rest were completely unknown, their forms ranging from insect-like creatures to beings that looked like walking trees. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster walked beside the Admiral, his eyes scanning the crowd with the trained awareness of a security officer. "Sir, I count at least 40 different species just on this platform." The intelligence reports didn't mention this many observers. "The trial is a big event for them," Clark replied quietly. Entertainment and politics rolled into one. A tall alien with silver skin and 6 arms approached them. His clothing marked him as a station official. "Admiral Clark of the Terran delegation. I am Coordinator Sethkar. I will escort you to your quarters and provide orientation for the trial proceedings." Clark nodded politely. "Thank you, Coordinator. When do we get to inspect the combat arena?" All participants receive arena access 12 hours before the trial begins. This allows for final preparations and tactical assessment. As they walked through the station's corridors, Clark observed the other beings around them. Many stopped to stare at the human delegation, their expressions ranging from curiosity to what looked like pity. The Admiral noticed that most conversations quieted when they passed. Foster leaned closer to Clark. "Sir, I'm picking up a lot of gambling activity. Most of the betting seems to be on how quickly the Krexa champion will win." "How quickly?" "The longest odds I heard were 15 minutes. Most bets are for under 5 minutes. Clark felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. The galaxy clearly expected humanity to be crushed quickly and efficiently. The question was whether they were right. Their quarters were simple but adequate. A central meeting room connected to smaller sleeping chambers for each member of the human delegation. The walls were made of the same dark metal as the station's exterior, with soft lighting that could be adjusted for different species' visual needs. Major Kate Sullivan was already there, reviewing data on a portable computer. She looked up as Clark entered. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the arena specifications. We have some interesting information. What did you find?" Sullivan activated a holographic display showing the arena layout. "The combat zone is roughly circular, about 200 meters in diameter. The floor is adjustable and can simulate different terrain types. But here's the important part. Look at the environmental controls." The display showed a list of atmospheric and gravitational settings. Clark studied the numbers carefully. Gravity at 2.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure at 1.8 times normal. Temperature range from -20 to +60 degrees Celsius. Exactly. Sullivan continued. "These conditions are considered extreme by galactic standards. They're designed to test both combatants to their limits." Foster pulled up another screen. "I've been researching previous trials. Every single one has been fought under these same conditions. The species that survive the environment usually win the combat." Clark rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What's Earth's gravity compared to galactic standard?" "About 1.2 times standard, sir. Earth's atmospheric pressure is roughly galactic normal, but our oxygen content is much higher than most species." "Can handle, and the temperature range?" Sullivan smiled slightly. "Sir, those temperatures are considered mild by Earth standards. Our soldiers train in much worse conditions." A chime sounded from the room's communication system. Coordinator Zethkar's voice filled the air. "All delegation leaders to the observation deck. The Krexa champion has arrived." Clark and his officers made their way to the observation deck along with representatives from dozens of other species. The deck offered a clear view of the main docking bay, where a massive ship had just arrived. The vessel was dark red and black, with weapon ports covering every surface. The docking bay doors opened, and the Krexa delegation emerged. They moved in perfect formation, their armor clicking against the metal floor. Each warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, their natural armor plates gleaming under the station's lights. Their heads were elongated, with sharp ridges running from their foreheads to the backs of their skulls dotted to the center of the formation, walked the champion. War leader Thakmer was even larger than the other Krexa, his armor darker and more elaborate. Scars covered the visible parts of his skin, telling the story of countless battles. His claws were longer than a human hand, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire. The gathered aliens on the observation deck began talking excitedly. Clark could hear fragments of conversation in various languages, but the tone was clear. They were impressed and terrified by the Krexa champion. "He's killed over 200 opponents," whispered a blue-skinned alien near Clark. "Never lost a single combat. Look at those claws," another being said. "They can cut through titanium like paper. The humans don't stand a chance," a third voice added. "Their champion will be dead before he knows the fight has started." Foster moved closer to Clark. "Sir, should we be concerned about the size difference?" Clark studied Thakmer carefully. The Krexa champion was certainly intimidating, but the Admiral had seen human soldiers overcome larger opponents before. "Size isn't everything, Commander. Let's see how our champion handles the pressure." The human champion had arrived on the station 2 days earlier. Sergeant First Class Danny Weber was a combat veteran with 15 years of military experience. He stood only 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed less than 200 pounds, making him seem tiny compared to the massive Krexa warrior. Weber had spent the last 2 days studying footage of previous trials and analyzing Krexa fighting techniques. He worked with Major Sullivan to develop strategies for dealing with a larger, stronger opponent. Most importantly, he had been training in the arena's environmental conditions. Dr. Amy Carter joined the group on the observation deck. She had been studying the physiological data on both species, comparing their capabilities in detail. "Admiral, I need to show you something important." She activated a small holographic display showing comparative biological data. "I've been analyzing the Krexa physical capabilities against human norms. They're stronger and have natural weapons, but look at these other factors." The display showed reaction times, endurance levels, and recovery rates. Human reaction times are 30% faster than Krexa norms. Our cardiovascular efficiency is nearly twice as good, and our ability to continue fighting while injured is off the charts compared to any species in the Galactic database. Clark studied the data carefully. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that while they have advantages in raw strength, we have advantages in speed, endurance, and adaptability. The question is whether those advantages will be enough. On the docking bay floor, Thakmer completed his arrival ceremony. He raised his clawed hands above his head and let out a war cry that echoed through the station. The sound was a mix of roar and scream that made several alien observers step back. In fear, the Krexa champion then performed a ritual that made Clark's blood run cold. A servant brought forward a sealed container. Thakmer opened it and removed what looked like a piece of meat. He held it up for all to see, then consumed it in one bite. "What was that?" Foster asked quietly. Dr. Carter's face had gone pale. According to the cultural briefings, Krexa champions eat the heart of their previous opponent before each new battle. It's supposed to give them strength. The observation deck had gone quiet as the aliens watched this display. Many were nodding approvingly. Clearly impressed by the show of dominance, Clark looked around at the gathered species. Their expressions ranged from excitement to bloodlust. This was entertainment for them, but for humanity, it was a matter of survival. "How long until the trial begins?" he asked. 18 hours, Sullivan replied. Clark nodded grimly. In 18 hours, they would discover whether humanity's hidden strengths were enough to overcome the galaxy's most feared warrior. The fate of Earth rested on one man's ability to survive against impossible odds. As the crowd began to disperse, Clark noticed that the betting was still active. The odds against humanity had actually gotten worse after seeing Thakmer's arrival. Ceremony. The galaxy was convinced that they were about to witness a massacre. Perhaps it was time to show them that humans were full of surprises. The arena floor hummed with energy as the environmental systems activated. Sergeant First Class Danny Weber stood at the entrance tunnel, feeling the artificial gravity increase to 2.3 times normal. His body adjusted automatically. To the heavier pull, muscles tensing to compensate for the added weight, the temperature dropped rapidly as he walked toward the center of the arena. His breath began to fog in the suddenly cold air. Around him, the atmospheric processors kicked in, flooding the space with a thick oxygen-rich mixture that would be toxic to most galactic species. Weber had spent the last 12 hours in the arena, getting used to the conditions. What the galaxy considered extreme was just another day at the office for someone who had trained in Alaska's winter storms and the deserts of Nevada. He rolled his shoulders and checked his equipment one final time. Above him, the observation galleries filled with thousands of alien spectators. Their excited chatter created a low buzzing sound that echoed off the arena walls. Weber could see the betting boards flashing with odds that heavily favored his opponent. The galaxy expected this to be over quickly. At the opposite end of the arena, War Leader Thakmer emerged from his entrance tunnel. The massive Krexa warrior moved with surprising grace, despite his 9-foot frame. His natural armor plates caught the arena lights, creating shifting patterns of reflection across his dark surface. Thakmer raised his arms above his head and roared his battle cry. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, designed to intimidate and terrify opponents before the fighting even began. Several alien spectators in the lower galleries backed away from the noise. Weber watched the display calmly. He had heard worse sounds in combat zones on Earth. Artillery bombardments and jet engines made more noise than one angry reptile. The arena's center platform rose from the floor, creating a circular fighting area about 50 meters across. The surface was rough metal, designed to provide traction in the challenging environmental conditions. Warning lights flashed around the perimeter, indicating that the combat zone was now active. A holographic announcer appeared above the arena. The being looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a tree, with tentacles that moved as it spoke. Citizens of the galaxy, welcome to the trial of supremacy. Today, we witness the ancient ritual that determines the order of military power among the stars. The crowd responded with cheers and roars from dozens of different species. The sound was unlike anything Weber had ever heard, a mixture of alien voices that somehow managed to be both exciting and terrifying. In the red corner, representing the Krexa Empire, we present War Leader Thakmer, champion of 7 trials, victor of 200 personal combats, master of the ancient fighting arts. Thakmer stepped onto the platform and performed his pre-battle ritual. He extended his claws to their full length, each one gleaming like polished knives. He then struck his chest with both fists, producing a sound like hammers hitting steel. The crowd roared its approval. In the blue corner, representing the Terran species, we present Sergeant First Class Danny Weber, first human to participate in the trial of supremacy. Weber stepped onto the platform without ceremony. He was wearing standard military fatigues and combat boots, with no armor or visible weapons. Compared to the imposing Krexa warrior, he looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong fight. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some aliens seemed confused by the human's small size and plain appearance. Others laughed openly, clearly amused by what they saw as a mismatch. The betting boards flashed as more wagers were placed against the human. In the VIP observation box, Admiral Clark watched through binoculars. Dr. Carter stood beside him, monitoring both fighters' vital signs through the arena's medical sensors. Weber's heart rate is elevated but stable, she reported. He's managing the stress well. What about the Krexa? Clark asked. Thakmer's readings are interesting. His body temperature is lower than expected for the current arena conditions. I think the cold is affecting him more than he's showing. The holographic announcer continued. The rules are simple. Combat continues until one warrior yields, is unable to continue, or dies. No weapons are permitted beyond natural capabilities. Victory brings honor to the winner's species and establishes galactic hierarchy for the next 300 years, Weber. And Thakmer approached the center of the platform. Up close, the size difference was even more dramatic. The Krexa champion towered over the human, his shadow falling across Weber's entire body. You're brave to face me, small one, Thakmer said in heavily accented galactic standard. I will make your death quick as a sign of respect. Weber looked up at the massive warrior without fear. Thanks for the offer, but I'll pass. The crowd fell silent at the human's casual response. Most species showed proper deference to Krexa warriors, especially one as decorated as Thakmer. The lack of fear in Weber's voice was something new. The arena's combat signal sounded, a deep tone that vibrated through the metal floor. The trial of supremacy had officially begun. Thakmer wasted no time. He lunged forward with incredible speed, his claws extended toward Weber's chest. The attack was a classic Krexa opening move, designed to end fights quickly through overwhelming force. Weber moved. The human's reaction was faster than anything the crowd had expected. Instead of backing away from the attack, he stepped forward and to the side, using Thakmer's momentum against him. As the Krexa warrior's claws swept past where Weber had been standing, the human struck. Weber's fist connected with a gap in Thakmer's natural armor, just below the ribcage. The punch would have been powerful enough to drop most humans, but against the massive alien, it seemed to have little effect, except for the thin line of dark blood that appeared where Weber's knuckles had struck. The crowd gasped. First blood had been drawn by the human. Thakmer looked down at the small wound in surprise. In 7 previous trials, no opponent had managed to injure him in the opening exchange. He had expected to end this fight with his first attack. Impossible, whispered an alien observer in the crowd. No one draws first blood against a Krexa champion. Weber had already moved away from his opponent, creating distance while Thakmer processed what had happened. The human's breathing was steady despite the heavy gravity and thick atmosphere. His movements were smooth and controlled, showing no signs of the environmental stress that should have been affecting him. Thakmer roared in anger and charged again, this time more cautiously. His claws swept in wide arcs, trying to force Weber into a corner where the human's speed advantage would be reduced. Weber ducked under the first swipe and rolled away from the second. As he came up from the roll, he struck again, this time hitting Thakmer's knee joint. The Krexa warrior stumbled slightly but remained upright. The crowd was beginning to murmur with confusion and excitement. This was not how trials usually went. The human should have been dead by now, not dancing around the arena and landing hits on the supposedly invincible champion. Dr. Carter was watching the medical readouts with growing interest. Admiral, you need to see this. Weber's performance is actually improving as the fight continues. His muscle efficiency is increasing and his reaction times are getting faster. Is that normal? Clark asked. For humans, yes. We call it getting warmed up. But according to the Galactic database, no other species shows this kind of performance improvement during combat on the arena floor. Thakmer was beginning to understand that he was facing something different. The human's stamina seemed unlimited, and his ability to avoid attacks was beyond anything in the Krexa fighting manuals. The temperature in the arena continued to drop, and the atmospheric pressure increased. These changes were automatic, designed to test both fighters as the combat progressed. Thakmer's movements began to slow slightly as the cold affected his reptilian metabolism. Weber, on the other hand, seemed unaffected by the environmental changes. If anything, he appeared to be moving more freely as his body adapted to the conditions. The human struck again, this time targeting a nerve cluster in Thakmer's shoulder. The Krexa warrior's left arm went partially numb from the precisely placed blow. How does he know our anatomy? Thakmer wondered aloud. Speaking in his native language, Weber had studied every piece of information available about Krexa. Physiology. He knew where their weak points were, how their nervous system functioned, and what kind of damage would be most effective. The human military had been preparing for this fight since the moment they learned about the trial. The crowd was no longer laughing. The betting boards showed confused activity as odds began to shift slightly in favor of the human. Something impossible was happening in the arena, and the galaxy was watching in growing amazement. Thakmer backed away from his opponent, reassessing the situation. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy who seemed to be getting stronger as the fight continued. The human's small size was proving to be an advantage, allowing him to move quickly and strike precisely while avoiding the Krex's powerful but slower attacks. Weber settled into a fighting stance, his eyes never leaving his opponent. The real fight was just beginning. The arena temperature dropped another 10 degrees as the environmental systems continued their programmed cycle. Ice crystals began forming on the metal surfaces around the combat platform. The atmospheric pressure increased again, making the air so thick that most galactic species would struggle to breathe. Thakmer felt the cold seeping through his natural armor. His reptilian biology was beginning to work against him as his body temperature dropped. His movements became slightly slower, his reflexes less sharp. This had never happened in previous trials, where his opponents had always succumbed to the harsh conditions before they could become a factor. Weber seemed completely unaffected by the environmental changes. He moved with the same fluid grace. As when the fight began, his breathing steady and controlled. The thick atmosphere that was choking other species was just another day at high altitude for someone who had trained in the mountains of Colorado. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the impossible continued to unfold. The human had not only survived the opening minutes of combat, but was actually performing better as time passed. This went against everything they knew about warfare and biology. Thakmer decided to change tactics. Instead of relying on his usual brutal assault, he would use his superior reach and strength to wear down the smaller opponent. He began making calculated attacks, using his longer arms to strike while staying out of Weber's range. The strategy worked initially. Weber was forced to dodge and weave constantly, unable to get close enough to land his precise strikes. Thakmer's claws whistled through the air, just inches from the human's face and body, any one of them capable of ending the fight instantly. But as the minutes passed, something strange began to happen. Weber's movements became more efficient, more precise. He was learning Thakmer's attack patterns and adapting to them in real time. The human's ability to process and respond to new information was beyond anything in the Krex's experience. Commander Steve Parker watched from the observation deck, monitoring the fight through tactical sensors. Admiral, Weber's performance metrics are off the charts. His muscle efficiency has increased by 20% since the fight began. Clark nodded grimly. That's normal for humans under stress. We call it adrenaline, but it's more than that. We're designed to get stronger when we're in danger, Doctor. Carter was studying the biological readouts from both fighters. The Krex's core temperature is dropping steadily. His reaction times are down 15% from the start of the fight. Meanwhile, Weber's vital signs indicate he's entering what we call the zone. The zone? An alien observer asked, overhearing the conversation. It's a mental state where human performance peaks, Carter explained. Everything slows down, focus becomes absolute, and the body operates at maximum efficiency. Most species can't achieve this state, and those that can usually can't maintain it on the arena floor. Weber was demonstrating exactly what Dr. Carter meant. The human had stopped simply reacting to Thakmer's attacks and had begun predicting them. He moved with an almost supernatural awareness, sliding past claws that should have torn him apart. The crowd began to murmur with excitement and fear. Some aliens were standing, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The betting boards flickered rapidly as odds shifted back and forth with each exchange. Thakmer grew frustrated as his attacks continued to miss. He had never faced an opponent who could anticipate his moves so accurately. The human seemed to know where he was going to strike before he himself decided. In desperation, the Krexa champion attempted his signature move. He feinted left, then spun right with his claws extended, creating a whirling circle of death that had killed dozens of previous opponents. No enemy had ever survived the spinning claw attack. Weber dropped to one knee and rolled forward, passing under the deadly spin. As Thakmer completed his rotation, the human was already rising behind him. Weber struck with both fists, hitting pressure points on either side of the Krex's spine. Thakmer's legs buckled. The massive warrior crashed to the arena floor, his nervous system temporarily disrupted by the precisely placed strikes. The crowd gasped as their supposedly invincible champion struggled to regain his footing. Impossible, whispered Counselor Velter from the VIP section. No species should be able to target our nervous systems so precisely. Weber stepped back, allowing Thakmer to rise. The human's actions confused the alien observers, who expected him to press his advantage. In galactic combat doctrine, mercy was a sign of weakness, but Weber wasn't showing mercy. He was demonstrating something far more dangerous: complete confidence in his ability to win. The human knew he could end the fight whenever he chose, so he was willing to let it continue. Thakmer struggled to his feet, his pride wounded as much as his body. He had dominated galactic combat for decades, and now a small human was toying with him. The realization filled him with a rage that burned hotter than the arena's environmental systems. You dare mock me? Thakmer roared, his voice echoing through the arena. Weber's response was calm and measured. I'm not mocking you. I'm showing you what happens when you fight someone from a world where everything tries to kill you. The crowd fell silent at the human's words. The concept of a world where survival was a constant struggle was alien to most galactic species. Their worlds were civilized, controlled, safe. Thakmer charged with renewed fury, abandoning all technique in favor of raw aggression. His claws swept in wide arcs, his movements powered by desperation and wounded pride. This was exactly what Weber had been waiting for. The human's response was a masterclass in combat efficiency. He moved like water, flowing around Thakmer's attacks while landing precise strikes on nerve clusters, joint connections, and pressure points. Each blow was calculated to cause maximum damage while requiring minimum effort. The Krexa champion's roars of rage gradually turned to sounds of pain and exhaustion. His attacks became slower and less coordinated as Weber's systematic assault took its toll. The human was dissecting his opponent with surgical precision. In the observation deck, the alien spectators watched in growing horror. This wasn't the quick, brutal fight they had expected. It was a demonstration of how a smaller, seemingly weaker opponent could defeat a larger one through superior technique and endurance. How is this possible? Asked a multi-eyed alien representative. The human is half his size, Major Kate Sullivan. Overheard the question and decided to provide an answer. Size doesn't matter when you know how to use leverage, timing, and anatomy. Weber is fighting smart, not hard. The arena's environmental systems reached their maximum settings. The temperature had dropped to -30 degrees, the atmospheric pressure was crushing, and the gravity was now at 3 times galactic standard. These conditions would kill most species within minutes. Weber moved as if the harsh environment didn't exist. His body had adapted to the conditions automatically, drawing on evolutionary advantages that came from living on a world where comfort was a luxury and survival was earned daily. Thakmor, meanwhile, was visibly struggling. His movements were sluggish, his breathing labored. The cold was affecting his reptilian metabolism, and the heavy gravity was making each movement a tremendous effort. The human pressed his advantage, launching a series of rapid strikes that Thakmor could barely track, let alone defend against. Weber's fists moved like pistons, each punch targeting a specific weakness in the Krex's defenses. The massive warrior stumbled backward, his vision blurring from the repeated impacts. For the first time in his long career, Thakmor felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The human was not just surviving. He was winning. Weber could see the change in his opponent's eyes, the absolute confidence that had carried Thakmor through 7 trials was cracking. The Krexa champion was beginning to understand that he was facing something beyond his experience. "You fought well," Weber said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "But this ends now." The human's final attack was a thing of beauty. He moved forward with explosive speed, his fist connecting with a nerve cluster at the base of Thakmor's skull. The Krexa champion's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the arena floor like a falling mountain. The arena fell completely silent. Tens of thousands of alien spectators stared in disbelief at the impossible scene before them. The greatest warrior in galactic history lay unconscious at the feet of a human soldier who looked like he could continue fighting for hours. Weber stood over his fallen opponent, not in triumph, but in respect. He had won, but he understood the significance of what had just happened. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. In the observation deck, Admiral Clark allowed himself a small smile. The impossible had become reality, and Earth's place in the galaxy had just changed forever. The silence in the arena stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Tens of thousands of alien spectators stared at the impossible scene before them. War leader Thakmor, the most feared warrior in the galaxy, lay unconscious on the metal floor while a human soldier stood calmly nearby. Weber checked his opponent's pulse to make sure the Krexa champion was still alive. Satisfied that Thakmor would recover, the human stepped back and waited for the official announcement. The arena's medical systems were already scanning both fighters, confirming what everyone could see with their own eyes. The holographic announcer appeared above the arena, its tentacles moving frantically as it processed the unprecedented situation. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, we have a winner. The trial of supremacy goes to Sergeant First Class Danny Weber, representing the Terran species." The crowd's reaction was unlike anything in the history of the trials. Some aliens cheered, caught up in the excitement of witnessing something historic. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had seen. Many simply stared at Weber as if he were some kind of impossible creature. In the VIP observation section, Counselor Velter was speaking rapidly into a communication device. His blue skin had gone pale, and his forearms gestured wildly as he tried to explain the situation to whoever was on the other end of the transmission. Admiral Clark watched the chaos with satisfaction. The galaxy had just learned that their assumptions about humanity were completely wrong. Earth was not the peaceful garden world they had believed it to be, Dr. Carter was studying the biological data from the fight, her eyes wide with amazement. Admiral, you need to see these readings. Weber's performance during the final minutes was beyond anything I've seen in human physiology. What do you mean? Clark asked. His muscle efficiency peaked at levels that should be impossible to sustain. His nervous system was processing information and issuing commands faster than our equipment could measure. And his cardiovascular system was operating at maximum efficiency while barely registering stress. Major Sullivan joined the conversation. That's what happens when humans fight for survival. Our bodies can do things that don't make sense on paper. Below in the arena, medical teams were attending to Thakmer. The Krexa champion was regaining consciousness, his eyes focusing slowly on the human who had defeated him. Weber approached carefully, offering his hand to help his opponent stand. Thakmer stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In Krexa culture, accepting help from a victor was a sign of complete submission. But the massive warrior was also bound by ancient codes of honor that demanded respect for superior warriors. Slowly, Thakmer reached out and grasped Weber's hand. The human pulled with surprising strength, helping the 9-foot alien regain his footing. The crowd watched this exchange with fascination, understanding its cultural significance. You are not what you appear to be, Thakmer said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the arena's acoustics. Weber nodded respectfully. None of us are. That's something your people and mine are going to have to figure out together. The words carried deeper meaning than most observers realized. The trial of supremacy wasn't just about determining military hierarchy. It established trade relationships, territorial boundaries, and political alliances for centuries to come. Thakmer straightened to his full height, his natural armor plates catching the arena lights. Despite his defeat, he maintained the dignity of a warrior. I have fought for 30 years and never met my equal. Today, I learned that strength comes in forms I did not understand. The Krexa champion turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. I, War Leader Thakmer, acknowledge the superiority of the human warrior. The Krexa Empire submits to Terran authority as dictated by the ancient laws. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The Krexa had never submitted to anyone. Their empire controlled 17 star systems and commanded the respect of hundreds of species. Now they were acknowledging human dominance. In the emergency session chamber aboard the space station, the Galactic Council convened an immediate meeting. Representatives from major species filled the room, their voices raised in confused discussion. The carefully maintained order of galactic civilization had just been turned upside down. Counselor Velter called for order, his usual calm demeanor cracked by the day's events. We need immediate clarification on the Terran species classification. Our records clearly show Earth as a Class 3 garden world with minimal defensive capabilities. Commander Steve Parker had been monitoring galactic communications and joined Admiral Clark with disturbing news. Sir, we're receiving priority messages from 17 different species requesting immediate alliance negotiations. They want protection. Agreements in place before we leave the station. Clark understood the implications. The galaxy operated on a strict hierarchy based on military power. Humanity had just moved from the bottom tier to the absolute top in the space of 1 hour. Every species that had dismissed them as harmless was now terrified of potential retaliation. Dr. Carter approached with a data pad showing Earth's environmental specifications. Admiral, I think we need to address the Council directly. They're operating under completely false assumptions about our homeworld. What kind of false assumptions? Carter activated the display, showing Earth's environmental data compared to galactic standards. They classified Earth as a garden world because our temperature ranges and atmospheric composition seemed mild by their standards. But they didn't account for the variables. The data was startling when viewed from an alien perspective. Earth's gravity was higher than most inhabited worlds. The atmospheric pressure and oxygen content were at levels that would be toxic to many species. Weather patterns included storms that would be classified as natural disasters on other planets. Most importantly, Carter continued, they didn't understand our biology. Human beings are adapted to survive in conditions that would kill the majority of galactic species. We're not garden world dwellers. We're apex predators from a death world. The term death world carried specific meaning in galactic classification. These were planets where survival required constant adaptation and evolution. Species that evolved on death worlds were typically the most dangerous in the galaxy, but they were also extremely rare. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Hayes had been coordinating with diplomatic personnel and brought urgent news. Admiral, we have a situation developing. 3 minor species have formally requested human protection from Krexa territories. Apparently, the Krexa have been demanding tribute from their neighbors for decades. Clark rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of unexpected responsibility. How many species are we talking about? Initial reports suggest at least 12 different civilizations were under Krexa protection arrangements. Now that the Empire has submitted to us, those relationships are unclear. The political implications were staggering. Humanity had entered the trial expecting to fight for their survival. Instead, they had accidentally become the dominant military power in a significant portion of the galaxy. In the station's communication center, priority messages were flooding in from across known space. Species that had never contacted Earth directly were requesting immediate diplomatic relations. Trade proposals, alliance offers, and protection requests filled the channels. Admiral Clark realized that Earth Command needed to be informed immediately. The political situation was changing by the hour, and decisions made in the next few days would affect humanity's future for centuries. Get me a secure channel to Earth, he ordered. Priority Alpha classification, as the communication was established. Clark reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 12 hours ago, humanity was facing potential extinction. Now they were being thrust into a position of galactic leadership they had never sought and weren't sure they wanted, the victory in the arena had revealed humanity's true nature to the galaxy. Earth was not a peaceful garden world populated by gentle beings. It was a death world that had forged its inhabitants into something the galaxy had never seen before, warriors who could adapt, endure, and overcome anything the universe threw at them. The question now was what humanity would do with this unexpected power. The galaxy was watching and waiting to see what kind of leaders the Death World Titans would become. Weber remained in the arena, speaking quietly with Thakmer about their respective worlds and cultures. The conversation between former enemies was laying the foundation for a relationship that would reshape galactic civilization. The age of human dominance had begun, whether Earth was ready for it or not. 6 months after the trial of supremacy, Admiral Henry Clark stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned space station, Terra Prime. The massive structure orbited at the edge of human space, serving as both a diplomatic center and a symbol of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Through the viewport, he could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the station's various ports. Trade vessels, diplomatic shuttles, and even former Krexa warships moved in carefully coordinated patterns around the facility. The transformation had been remarkable and sometimes overwhelming. Earth had gone from being a minor player in galactic politics to the center of a new alliance system that spanned half the known galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison approached with the daily briefing reports. His ship, the Vengeance, was now flagship of the Terran Protection Fleet, a growing collection of vessels from multiple species that had requested human leadership. "Admiral, we have updates from the outer territories," Morrison said, handing over a data pad. "The Krexa integration program is ahead of schedule. War Leader Thakmer's proposals for joint training exercises have been approved by Earth Command." Clark nodded as he reviewed the reports. The relationship with the former Galactic champions had been one of the most surprising developments. Instead of resenting their defeat, the Krexa had embraced their new role as humanity's primary military allies. Thakmer had explained it simply during one of their early meetings. "We respect strength above all else. Your species has shown strength we never imagined possible. To serve alongside such warriors is an honor, not a shame." The Krexa military doctrine was being completely restructured around human concepts of adaptability and endurance training. Their warriors were learning to fight beyond their apparent limits, to think creatively under pressure, and to turn environmental challenges into tactical advantages. Commander Lisa Brooks joined them at the viewport, her attention focused on a group of small ships approaching the station. "Those are the representatives from the Zephyrian colonies. They're requesting inclusion in the Terran Protectorate." The Terran Protectorate had been established as a voluntary alliance system, unlike the traditional galactic empires that ruled through force. Humanity offered protection and guidance in exchange for cooperation and mutual support. Dr. Amy Carter had been instrumental in developing the philosophy behind the Protectorate. Her studies of human psychology and social behavior had convinced Earth's leaders that domination would ultimately fail. Instead, they chose partnership. "How many species are we up to now?" Clark asked. 47 confirmed members, with another dozen in negotiation, Brooks replied. "The interesting thing is that most of them aren't seeking protection from external threats. They want help dealing with internal problems." This had been an unexpected development. Many species had evolved in stable environments with little change over thousands of years. When faced with challenges that required adaptation or innovation, they found themselves unable to cope. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their combat prowess, but their ability to solve problems through creative thinking and persistent effort. Human advisors were helping stagnant civilizations modernize their technology, resolve resource conflicts, and develop new approaches to governance. Major Kate Sullivan had been leading the cultural exchange programs. Her reports showed remarkable progress in teaching other species the human concepts of resilience and adaptation. "The most interesting case is the Helix Collective," Sullivan had noted in her latest briefing. "They're a hive mind species that couldn't handle individual decision-making. We've been teaching them to value independent thought within their collective structure." Sergeant Danny Weber had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy. His victory over Thakmer was retold in dozens of languages, often with embellishments that made him sound more like a mythical hero than a human soldier. Weber himself remained remarkably unchanged by his fame. He continued his duties as a training instructor, now teaching combat techniques to warriors from multiple species. His classes were always overbooked, with beings traveling across the galaxy to learn from the champion who had defeated the Krexa. The most important lesson, Weber often told his students, isn't about fighting techniques or physical strength. It's about never giving up, even when everything seems impossible. The economic changes had been as dramatic as the political ones. Human innovation and problem-solving abilities had sparked a technological renaissance throughout the galaxy. Species that had relied on the same technologies for centuries were suddenly developing new solutions to old problems. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster was coordinating trade negotiations when he discovered an unexpected pattern. "Admiral, the galactic economy has grown by 30% since the trial. Most of the growth is coming from new technologies developed through human-alien collaboration. The collaboration was producing remarkable results. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge bases was solving problems that had challenged galactic civilization for millennia. Energy efficiency, transportation systems, and communication networks were all advancing at unprecedented rates. The Galactic Council had undergone its own transformation. The rigid hierarchy based on military strength had given way to a more flexible system that valued contribution and cooperation. Humanity held the position of military leadership, but they actively encouraged other species to take the lead in areas where they had expertise. Counselor Velter had adapted to the new order better than many expected. The humans have taught us something important, he had announced during a recent session. True strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the ability to help others become stronger. Earth itself had changed significantly. The planet was now receiving visitors from across the galaxy, many of whom wanted to understand how a Deathworld had produced such remarkable inhabitants, environmental scientists from dozens of species. We're studying Earth's ecosystems, trying to understand how such challenging conditions had shaped human evolution. Some species were even experimenting with exposing their young to controlled hardships, hoping to develop similar adaptability. Clark received a priority communication from Earth Command. President Maria Santos appeared on the holographic display. Her expression serious but optimistic. "Henry, I wanted to update you on the latest developments. The UN has officially approved the Galactic Integration Protocol. We're establishing permanent diplomatic missions on 12 major worlds and opening Earth to limited alien immigration." The decision represented a fundamental shift in human policy. For the first time in their history, humans would be living as equals alongside alien species on multiple worlds. "There's something else," Santos continued. "We've received a request from the Outer Rim territories. A group of species has discovered what they believe is another Deathworld. They want human assistance in making contact with whatever lives." There, Clark felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was still learning about their place in it. Each new discovery brought fresh challenges and opportunities. Dr. Carter joined the group with news from her latest research project. "Admiral, I've completed the comparative study of human and galactic psychology. The results are fascinating. What did you find?" Most galactic species evolved in stable environments where survival was predictable. They developed sophisticated social structures and advanced technologies, but they lost the ability to adapt quickly to new situations. Humans retained that adaptability because Earth never let us get comfortable. The implications were profound. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their physical capabilities or combat skills. It was their mental flexibility, their refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. As Clark looked out at the busy space around Terra Prime, he reflected on how much had changed since that day in the arena. The galaxy had expected to witness humanity's destruction. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of a new age. The Deathworld Titans had indeed clashed with the galaxy's champions. But instead of conquest or destruction, the result had been transformation. The rigid order of galactic civilization was giving way to something more dynamic, more adaptable, and ultimately more hopeful. Children from dozens of species were now learning side by side, sharing ideas and perspectives that would shape the galaxy's future. The concepts of perseverance, creativity, and mutual support were spreading throughout civilized space. Thakmer appeared at the observation deck, his massive frame moving with the careful grace that had made him a champion. The former war leader now served as humanity's chief military advisor, and his insights had proven invaluable. "Admiral, Thakmer said in his careful English. The joint training exercise was successful. Human and Krexa warriors fought as one unit. Your species continues to surprise me, Clark smiled. That's what we do best, surprise people. As the day shift ended and the night shift began, Clark remained at the viewport. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, challenges, and opportunities. Humanity had found their place in it not as conquerors, but as teachers, protectors, and partners.